Hello students and welcome back to the classroom. Today we are going to continue our review of sort of basic arithmetic on our way towards getting into Integrated Math 1. Now as you can see we've got a lot to do today, so we're just going to go ahead and crack on. To start with, I noticed something that a couple of folks commented in my video from last time, not in the comments but in the Facebook post that I made. And a couple of folks mentioned that if they were to do a math problem, they were most likely to reach for the calculator right away. And in normal day-to-day activities, I agree that calculators are probably the best way to go. There's a reason that we invented them so that we don't have to do that kind of calculation over and over ourselves. In fact, when I was a student, I was told very often that I would have to learn how to do this arithmetic in my head because I wouldn't be carrying a calculator around everywhere I go, which of course turned out to be a lie. Hey Google, what is 95 times 172?
The answer is 16,340.
So we have the ability to do these calculations and get answers instantly, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. But as students of math, it is also important to be able to justify your conclusions, and that's something we're going to be talking about a bit today. Getting a calculator to do the work for you is a good way to get an answer, but it doesn't lead to greater understanding of the patterns between the numbers and how they interact with each other. So in a class that I'm teaching, I usually request that calculators be reserved for later in the year after we've had some practice doing this sort of calculation in our heads and on paper. Once I know you can do it, then yeah, use the calculator all you want. Again, we're doing more than just getting answers here. If we had just busted out our calculators last video and found out that 15 times 6 is 90, we would have missed out on all those fascinating thought processes and different ways of thinking about it that folks came up with. Okay, so enough about calculators. Once again, you will see me using Google as a calculator fairly often throughout the course of this video series, so please don't think there's any shame in using calculators. Just remember that I'm trying to highlight ideas, not answers. Okay, so the second thing I want to talk about is about subtraction. Now, when we are children in elementary school, we are taught that subtraction means taking away. Right? So for example, if Sally has 6 cookies, man, I have not eaten yet today and I am hungry. If Sally has 6 cookies and she eats 2 of them, how many does she have left over, right? This is a very common kind of first, second grade subtraction problem. We see that she currently has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cookies. If she eats 2, now this particular system makes a ton of intuitive sense, right? You can see the 6 cookies. You can see 2 of them being taken away. You can see that the result is 4. But what if you were given a problem that looked something like this? Well, given our current definition of subtraction as taking away things, this is an impossible problem. Right? If I have 10 cookies, I can't eat 14 cookies. It's physically impossible. This is a meaningless problem. I'm going to fix that 0. Still getting used to this new tablet. So my handwriting is even worse than usual, so I apologize in advance. So is this even a useful question, though? Like, why would I care if I wanted to take away a bigger number from a smaller number? Why is that important? Why is that useful? There's no point in continuing to explore this train of thought if there's never going to be any use to it. So instead of looking at subtraction as taking things away from a pile, I'm instead going to give you a few different alternative ways of looking at addition and subtraction with positive and negative numbers in a way that still makes intuitive sense, I hope, but also expands to include things like negative numbers. Okay, so let's talk about one thing that everybody loves to talk about, except when it's a problem: money. Money is on everyone's mind, especially now that so many people are unemployed because there's pandemic happening. So this is a pretty important idea. Now, we are going to explore this idea by looking at my net worth. And these numbers are true as of the recording of this video. I'm not here to lie to you or deceive you or keep things from you. As of this very moment, I have about $1,600 in my checking account. Okay? I also have about $1,000 in a savings account. And I'd say I have about $20 in my wallet. Okay, so if we look at that and just look at how much money I've got, 1,600 plus 1,000 is 2,600 plus 20. I have $2,620 total in theory right now. Okay. However, the problem is I also owe $400 on a credit card. And because I owe that much, that's being taken away from my total amount of money, right? So I'm going to put a negative in front of it. Okay? So I have one credit card that is $400. That expenditure is what bought the tablet that I'm currently working on. I also have another credit card with a balance of $1,500. Primarily because it's been a while since I've had a really stable income thanks to COVID and everything, so I've been using my credit cards more and more to buy things like gas and groceries. And here's the big thing, I still owe approximately $10,000 in student loans. So that gives me a total debt of, let's see, 10,000 and 1,500 is 11,500, and another 400 is $11,900. Okay? So, how much money do I really have? Yeah, it's true that I've got a little bit more than $2,500 in a bank account right now, at least until my rent check clears. That's going to go down really fast in a day or three. But in reality, what I've got is a big pile of debt, which makes my net worth actually negative. What is 2,620 minus 11,900?
The answer is minus 9,280.
Negative $9,280 is my current net worth. So hopefully you can see that positive and negative numbers do actually have a use here, because there are lots of scales that can be negative. Other scales that can be negative are things like temperature. You can have negative 15 degrees either in centigrade or in freedom units. We also get a chance to sort of see the relationship between these. If you take 11,900 and subtract 2,620 from it, you will get positive 9,280. And hopefully that makes sense, because if I were to try to pay back all of my debt right now, I would give all of my money, $2,620, bringing me to zero, and then I would still have another $9,280 to go, after I've paid all of the money that I have now. So that's a look at seeing positive and negative numbers as surplus and debt. But that's still kind of abstract to me. The fact that I am worth negative $9,280, in addition to being kind of depressing, is also still pretty abstract. I have a hard time visualizing that, and I know a lot of you are going to be visual learners. So here's what we're going to do next. We're going to try something a little more visual. And I'm going to start with a sports analogy, but don't worry, for those of you who are not sports fanatics, I will also be giving a non-sports example in a few moments. So let's say that you are an American football team and you are currently at the 50-yard line. That's a football. Use your imagination. I know it looks like a poop. It's a football. So let's say instead of these numbers here, I'm just going to put a line through these numbers. And we're going to say that where you are right now is 0. Okay? So when I say you're starting at 0, I just mean that the 50-yard line is your start point. And we'll say that your team is moving in the direction of the red end zone here. Okay? So any yards that you pick up going toward the end zone are a positive thing for you, right? They are a gain for you. And any yards that the opposing team pushes you back, those are negative yards that you're going to have to make up if you want to progress. So forgetting about the actual rules of downs and everything for a moment, let's say that I throw a really great pass and add 15 yards, right? So from the 50-yard line, from 0, where I started, I have now gone forward 15 yards. Can you see that? No, it doesn't look very good. Let's see if I can make that a little bit lighter. Okay, so we are now 15 yards ahead of where we started. Well, what if then, I don't know, the quarterback gets sacked 7 yards behind the line of scrimmage? So in the next play, we actually lose 7 yards. Okay, so in the next play, we lose 5, 6, 7 yards. Where are we now? Relative to where we started, well, we moved 15 up, and then we moved 7 down, so 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. We have now gained 8 yards since we started. If, on the other hand, you had dropped back to throw the ball and gotten sacked, say, 10 yards behind the line of scrimmage in the first play, well, now you are 10 yards behind where you started. You have to make up that 10 yards just to get back to your starting point so that you can begin to go forward. So even if you throw a great pass that gains you 35 yards, you're not really getting 35 yards, right? You have to make up the 10 yards that you lost, so you're really gaining a total of 25 yards. So instead of looking at this as surplus and debt, you can look at positive and negatives being where do you start on the football field and where do you end relative to where you start. But as promised, not all of us are sports people, so I'm going to go ahead and take a look at an analogy that is a little bit less sports-based. I lived in Europe for a year, specifically in Berlin. And in Europe, they do this great thing that I wish that we did here in the United States when it comes to labeling their floors in buildings. Okay? So I'm actually going to unlock this and make it a little bit smaller. Okay, so in Europe, or here in America, the ground floor, the floor that you tend to walk into if you're walking into a building off the street, we call it the first floor, and that provides some problems for reasons that we'll get into later on in this series. There will always be this sort of weird distinction between do I start at 0 or do I start at 1? In Europe, they start at 0. So the ground floor, they call it the 0th floor, the ground floor, instead of the first floor. The first floor is the floor above the ground floor, okay? Which would make this the second floor, the third floor, the fourth floor. And again, the difference between starting at 0 and starting at 1 is a theme we're going to be seeing repeated a lot in this course. But even more interestingly than that, if you have a building that continues down underground, obviously without windows, well, they call this first basement floor, floor -1. and floor -2 if it continues down. So again, you can think of adding and subtracting as moving up and down the floors of this building. Let's say I wanted to figure out, and I'm going to keep my numbers within what we've got here. Let's say I wanted to find out what 3 minus 5 was. Okay, 3 minus 5. So what am I doing? Well, I'm starting at the 3rd floor. I hope that makes sense. We're starting at 3. We're starting on the 3rd floor. This minus 5 means that we are moving down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 floors. I hope that makes sense. We start at floor 3, we move down 5 floors. Where do we end up? Well, let's see. 3, 2, 1, 0. We're at -2. And again, that should make sense. We can do that on our fingers. From 3, 2, 1, 0, -1, -2. So if it helps, you can think of adding and subtracting by going up and down floors in a building. Let's do one more example using the building. Let's say I have -1 plus 2. As always, I encourage you to pause the video for just a moment, or maybe you've already got it without even having to pause. Ready, set, go. Well, once again, if I start at floor -1, and that's where I'm starting, this +2 means that I'll be going up 1 floor, 2 floors. So I end up on floor 1. Again, this only works if we have the ground floor set as the 0th floor rather than the 1st floor. So with that in mind, I'd like to show you my way of adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers that helps me whenever I get confused. What I do is, instead of using a football field or a building, I just draw a number line. It's reasonably flat. Here's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. Okay? Now, when it comes to adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers, there are only 2 relevant questions. Question number 1 is, where do we start? And question 2 is, which direction are we moving? If you're looking at an addition or subtraction problem with a bunch of negative numbers flying around, if you can answer these 2 questions, you should be good to go. Let's give it a shot. Let's start easy. Let's start easy with something like 3 minus 7. Okay? Well, I start at 3. And if I am subtracting 7, does that mean I am moving up the number line or down the number line? Well, if it's -7, that's moving down the number line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spaces down the number line. My answer is -4. With this method, I am able to always make sure that I don't mix up my addition and my subtraction. It's very easy when negative and positive numbers start flying around to start throwing out answers without really understanding what you're doing. A lot of the time with this 3 minus 7, I have seen students say things like 10 or -10, because they just forget that you have to get from 3 to 0, and then there's only these 4 left over after that. Let's try another one. Let's say -2 plus 5. Okay? Again, We start at -2, and then we're going to move, let's see, +5. That means we're going to be moving up the number line, which in this case is to the right. 1 space, 2, 3, 4, 5. We end at +3. Okay? One more example, and then we'll move on. We're going to do something crazy like -1 minus -4. Okay? -1 minus -4. That's a lot of negatives. And the question is, which direction, right? We know we're going to start at x equals -1. We're going to start at -1 on the number line. But the question is, which way do I go? If I'm taking away a negative, am I going up or am I going down? A lot of students will say incorrectly that the answer to this is something like -5. I've also seen something like -3. There are lots of ways that you can get this one wrong, but only one way you can get it right. Think about it this way. Let's go back to my debt example. Okay? What if for a moment we consider that, let's say this credit card company here decides for some reason to forgive my debt. Okay? If they just decide to say, forget it, you don't have to pay us back, we're just going to eliminate it. Yeah, I know, keep dreaming, Cunningham. But what would happen to my net worth if that negative balance, if that debt was to be erased, to be taken away? Well, it would increase my net worth by $400, right? Not because it's actually giving me $400, but because it's wiping away $400 worth of negative that I currently have. So if we go back down, well, 1 minus -4, that's going to be moving up the number line. Just like with that $400 worth of debt being wiped out, if I subtract -4, I'm actually moving up the number line 4 spaces. And my answer is +3. Okay? So if you do what I do, and anytime you're confused by positives and negatives, actually draw a quick number line on your paper and ask yourself those questions. Where do we start? Which direction are we going? You can't go wrong.